Hello, all. Welcome to today's Public University Peer Group meeting. My name is Kim Dela Cruz, and I'll be your facilitator today. We'll be discussing the recently finalized FY26 peer groups and criteria. And I want to note that we'll be recording today's meeting. It will be shared with you all after today's meeting and later posted to our website. During the meeting, we welcome you to submit your comments and questions through the Q&A functionality. You can find that at the top bar on your screen. There is an option to submit anonymously, but do know that the default is non-anonymous. Since we are recording, we are doing a quick screening of submitted questions to ensure nothing private is publicized. If we do screen out your comment or question, we will follow up with you after the meeting. You're also always welcome to send institution-specific or otherwise private questions to our data support at highered.texas.gov email. We also encourage you to upvote comments or questions in the Q&A if you have an interest in any particular one, so we can get to those questions first. All right, so that's all of the housekeeping items, and I will pass it over to Assistant Director Sharon Wong.
Thanks so much, Kim. Good afternoon, everybody. We're so excited to have you guys here to join us for a meeting about peer groups. So I'm going to go over the agenda real quick before we start. We're going to just review the peer group timeline and just give you a high-level look of what the process looks like. We're going to look at the updated peer groups and data review. Then one of my colleagues from our funding team will talk about research funding streams and peer groups. Then we're going to have just a time of just Q&A to answer some of the questions you might have. And then we're going to have a future criteria discussion too that I hope will be engaging for you to talk about things to do, things that we can possibly talk about in the future. Okay, let's take a look at the goals for peer groups. And this is just a slide to refresh everyone's memory of why we do peer groups. We really aim to be most transparent with institutions in terms of what our methodology is and how we come up with the data, what our data sources are. And we really want to give you an opportunity every year to review the data and provide input during these meetings. And your feedback is so important to the process, and really appreciate everyone's participation in this. And at the same time, we also want to be in line with current statute. And then we also want to be timely too in making our peer group updates. You know, as many of you know, we have a lot of data tools available at your fingertips, and we want to make sure those peer groups are updated from Accountability to Almanac through all the different tools. And we want to make those updates as timely as possible for you to have it useful to you. All right, let's take a look at the timeline. So this is just a quick timeline or process of what we did with public universities. As you know, last year, we were able to review the criteria and then finalize the data. And in the summertime, we identified those new groupings, which led to the fall institutional data review and finalization. And then we also met with you last fall too to review this criteria and the new groupings that came out of that. And then following that piece of it, in the springtime, we updated Accountability and other tools with all the new peer groups. So from this, we have like every summer, we're going to start this process of finalizing the data, identifying the new peer groups, having these periods of time where you can review your data, and then having these peer group meetings where you can have some feedback and communication with us. So we definitely want to be engaging with you guys in terms of how we came up with these peer groupings. And then by statute, we're required to do peer group criteria review every 10 years, which is around 2034, but criteria may be reviewed more frequently as needed. So, you know, if we need to review it earlier than the 10 years, that's always possible, and we're always open to that as well. And here is just a review of what we came up with last year. Of all of different peer groups, from master's, comprehensive, doctoral, emerging research, and research. And those are just the high-level criteria that belongs in each peer group. And I think um, we'll provide a file here shortly that will give you more details behind the criteria if you just happen to want to know, well, what did we talk about last year? We'll give you some more details behind it, but this is just a high-level look of just some of the criteria changes that we talked about last year and then we implemented. Right. And here's just a highlight from this year's FY26 Public University Peer Group changes. The following institutions moved from Master's to Comprehensive: University of Texas Permian Basin, Texas A&M University San Antonio, and Sul-Ross State University. And then we also had one university move from Comprehensive to Doctoral, and that was Lamar University. And this is just an updated chart with all the new peer groupings. So your master's, comprehensive, doctoral, emerging research, and research. As you can see, all the institutions highlighted in bold moved up. So it relates to the previous slide of Sul-Ross, TMU, San Antonio, and UT Permian Basin are highlighted because they moved. And Lamar also moved from comprehensive to doctoral, and that's also bolded. So this is just a quick look on how the new groupings look for FY26. And so from this point, I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Melita Berger, who will guide you through some research funding streams and how it relates to peer groups.
Hi, so I'm going to start out here with the Texas Research University Fund. This fund is for public universities that are designated as a research university in accountability and that have 3 consecutive years of total research expenditures of $450 million. These allocations are based on the public university's 3-year average of total research expenditures. And of course, that's Texas A&M and University of Texas that are qualifying for that fund. The Texas Comprehensive Research Fund is for public universities that are not eligible for TRUF, TUF, or NRSF, which we'll discuss on the next slide. But the TCRF allocations are based on the 3-year average of federal and private research expenditures. So if you'd go to the next slide. Here we have the Texas University Fund, or TUF. This is for public universities that are not eligible for permanent university funding, or PUF. As a reminder, the PUF is a constitutional fund established in 1876, which supports higher ed at UT System and Texas A&M System. The TUF eligibility and allocations are based on federal and private research expenditures and research doctoral degrees. Eligible public universities may include a portion of the TUF corpus in their institutional endowment reporting. And finally, we have the National Research Support Fund, or NRSF. This is for PUF eligible public universities that otherwise meet the TUF eligibility criteria. NRSF eligibility and allocations are based on the 3-year average of federal and private research expenditures. Let me go to the next slide. Here's a table describing the links between research funds and peer groups. On the left, we can see the fund, and starting with Texas Research University Fund, as we've already discussed, there's a research designation that's required by statute in accountability. For the Texas University Fund and the National Research Support Fund, eligible universities are all emerging research or doctoral. However, there's no statutory requirement to be in a particular peer group to be eligible for those funds. And for the Texas Comprehensive Research Fund, universities are eligible if they're not eligible for TRUF, TUF, or NRSF, and these schools are doctoral, master's, and comprehensive, and there is no statutory requirement that they are in a particular peer group to receive that fund. There's some more information at that link, which you'll receive later, and now I would turn it over to Kim De La Cruz for some question and answer.
All right. We do have one question that we've received so far. Before we get started, I pulled up this page again, how to use the Q&A. You're also welcome to, if it's more comfortable for you, to raise your hand using the raise hand feature. Just do remember that we are recording and we do intend to post this. So if you do have more, I don't know, private like questions, you might submit it anonymously in the Q&A and we can look at that separately. So let's look at this first question that we received. As institutions grow, are they able to request a review prior to 10 years?
Yeah, to answer the question, yes. So by statute, it's at least every 10 years, but we can certainly have discussions definitely before the 10-year review. We're certainly not tied to that timeline. So has the landscape evolved? We're certainly open to discussion and feedback from the institutions.
All right. Does anyone else have any questions? We'll pause here for a few minutes so people have time to think of any questions. All right, how about let's move to this next discussion and we'll have another time for questions following Dr. Christina Zavala's quick presentation. So again, the Q&A will remain open and feel free to raise your hand with any questions. Without further ado, Christina.
Awesome, thank you, Kim. So wanted to briefly bring up something for discussion for the group to consider. So currently the FY26 peer groupings are established using the criteria of 2-year averages for the restricted and private expenditures alongside a 2-year average for research doctorates awarded. Internally, we've been having some conversation with Melita and her team about perhaps wanting to align some of this particular methodology to current GAI research funding methodology that is used. And so on the GAI research funding side, currently what is being used is a 3-year average for for the research and the private expenditures alongside the research doctorates awarded. So something we wanted to bring to this group today was a potential consideration for perhaps aligning this with that research funding methodology and shifting from a 2-year to a 3-year. We've done some preliminary analysis right now and have observed that on the research doctorate side, while the number of research doctorates does decrease when aligning with the methodology used by the GAI research funding process, for the most part, there aren't any significant differences that would cause a shift in peer group movement. We did, however, notice that there would likely be a bit of movement if we were to potentially consider using a 3-year average for the research and the private expenditures. So to kind of give an example, we looked at what would have occurred if for the FY26 criteria, we had used a 3-year average instead of 2. As Sharon mentioned earlier, we had 4 institutions that shifted peer groups. And if we had used the 3-year average, there actually would have only been a shift by 2 institutions. And so one of the points that we sort of wanted to consider with you all is just some, a few advantages and disadvantages something worth bringing up to the discussion, and we're very curious to hear from you all about any concerns about potentially moving from a 2-year average to a 3-year average. We've identified some, initial advantages like consistency with that methodology and across different divisions here in the agency, about perhaps capturing a more sort of stable historical tracking of these metrics. But we also understand that there might be some disadvantages to this. So I leave this here as a food for thought. We're going to continue to have conversations about this next year with you all. But I'm curious if there's any initial thoughts, concerns about this discussion point. And if not, then we can definitely go back to this criteria discussion in future months. Kim, do we want to pause really quick just to see if there's any concerns here?
Yeah, let's see if anyone's got any comments or questions about this. I think, if there's any other considerations that you want to surface to us today, that's great. But as Christina said, this isn't the last conversation we'll have with you all before we start over this process next summer. While people think about their questions, how about we go to this somewhat different question we received. How do we help our administration understand the differences between Carnegie classifications and those research expenditure levels and categories versus state of Texas classifications and research expenditure criteria?
Yep, that is a very great question. This question makes me wonder if perhaps there is some kind of documentation that would be helpful for our group to put together that kind of distinguishes the Carnegie from our peer group classifications. I know we have some existing information internally to that regard. So happy to think about ways that we can make it maybe easier as you have conversations internally at your institutions about the differences that exist between these different methodologies. I know it can be really hard when we have different definitions or methodologies that are working behind the scenes, and keeping all of that straight and also conveying what those differences are to others can be a challenge. So like I said, we're happy to brainstorm some ideas, and if that means putting a document together, we can certainly do that and send that out to you all.
Oh, just the mic always being off when you need to talk. Someone asked if I could drop the slides in the chat. Not this moment, but everyone will receive a follow-up email within the next few days with the slides, with the link to the recording, and probably some extra goodies too, because there's always more information to share. Another question that we received, could institutional research expenditures be added to?
Yeah, so I think this might be our first suggestion for future criteria to consider. So happy to take that down and use that, and then this 2-year and 3-year average potentially as a starting point when we revisit these conversations. I would say that there's not, we welcome any idea. So we're happy to consider this and have more discussions about what this might mean and what the potential impact would be to the peer groups.
Thanks, Christina. Yeah, we'll sit here for a few more minutes and see if y'all have any other questions. But it looks like we might get to end early today, so we'll stick around until about 2:30. Let me show this one other slide real quick.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Sharon, would you like to tell everyone where they can find more information about the peer groups?
Yeah, on accountability, we have a little tab that says resources, and you can select peer groups in the resources, and there's going to be a lot of updated peer group documents here for your reference for both public universities and community colleges. We'll get this updated in January, so please come back to accountability website to find additional references.
Thank you, Sharon. We did get another question. There have been many changes to federal research funding in the past year and proposals for additional changes to come. Would a change in the timeframe used be beneficial for the state?
I hoping maybe some additional context can be supplied for this one. I'm curious about the part, what a change in the time frame. I'm wondering what time frame in particular we're talking about here.
And again, if it's something you're comfortable with, feel free to raise your hand and I can unmic you if you feel that's easier. The 2-year versus 3-year average.
Ah, I see. I think mine is delayed from yours, Kim. I didn't.
Okay.
I was like, how did you know? Use be beneficial. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that additional context. It's something worth considering for sure, especially as we've identified some initial advantages and disadvantages, and this was just sort of preliminary brainstorm internally, and so definitely welcome other points of discussion and consideration for this. So yeah, I agree that's important context to factor into this particular criteria discussion.
Again, we're going to hang out here until about 2:30. So if you think of any questions, that's great. If you need to go with your busy schedules, that's also fine. We'll get the recording out as soon as we can and the slides. Yeah, let us know if you have any more questions. Let me put up that Q&A slide again with the data support at highered.texas.gov email. And let me see if I can add that to the chat as well. So that way, if you have anything else you want to discuss with us at any point of the year, please do reach out to us. Okay, seeing as there's less than 10 of you left here with us, I think we can call it. You know how to find us, the data support email. If you need anything, thank you for joining us today, and we appreciate all your feedback always. So have a good rest of your afternoon. Thank you.